Death and Dying Conversations on End-of-Life Matters. Thank you for being with us tonight for the Good Funeral with Thomas Lynch. This is our 7th event in the Death and Dying series. We want to express our thanks to the Hospice Foundation of the Ozarks for the grant funding that made this and the other Death and Dying events possible. We appreciate so many of you joining us this evening to help break the taboo of talking about death and start a community conversation on end-of-life topics. We hope you will continue the conversation outside of these walls by talking with the people in your life and by joining us at the other events in the series, including tomorrow night's Ask the Funeral Director program at 7 p.m. here in the auditorium. The complete schedule of events is available online at thelibrary.org/death, in the program guides that I know many of you have, and in Bookends magazine, which is available at all branches. We'd like to ask you to consider completing the survey that you were given on the way in. We use that to gauge the success of our programs and to get ideas for future programming. If you didn't get a survey on the way in, we will have them available after the program. Out of respect for our speaker, please take a moment to silence your cell phone or to make sure it's silenced. Thomas Lynch is one of the most well-known professionals in funeral service. That's saying a lot, since funeral professionals are not typically well-known outside of their communities. But Thomas isn't your standard undertaker. He's a published and prolific writer with 4 books of essays and 5 collections of poetry, along with countless articles and stories that have appeared in Newsweek, New York Times, the Times of London, the New Yorker, and many other publications. He has read and lectured at universities and literary centers throughout Europe, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and across the United States. He has taught with the Department of Mortuary Science at Wayne State University in Detroit, with the graduate program in writing at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and received numerous awards and grants from the National Book Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and many other organizations. Perhaps most surprisingly, Thomas has been the subject of 2 award-winning documentaries, PBS Frontline's The Undertaker and Learning Gravity, which was produced for the BBC, both taking viewers behind the scenes of an operating funeral home. He lives in Milford, Michigan, where he's been serving the community for more than 40 years, and spends part of the year in Moveen, County Clare, Ireland, where he keeps an ancestral cottage. Please give a warm Springfield welcome to Thomas Lynch.
Well, first of all, thanks to Sarah for that tastefully hyperbolic introduction. It's make the obituary of who to hear, the highlights talked about that way. It's so nice to hear the present tense, the upright. So thank you for that, for all your kindnesses. You want me to move this closer?
Thank you.
I will adopt my preaching voice. So, it's been very nice to be here in Springfield. Only today was I appraised of the fact that this is Brad Pitt's hometown. All the women nod their heads and all the men scowl. See that? Oh well, we'll get over that. We had a lovely dinner before we came over here, so to sing for one supper is not a bad thing. And I'm grateful to be outnumbered by so many people. For an internationally unheard of poet, it's always nice to be outnumbered at a poetry reading, which this is not. This will not be a poetry reading. I will begin with a poem and maybe end with a poem, depending on how the time goes. And then you can go home and tell your teenage children or grandchildren that among the other things you did today was attend a poetry reading. And this will, I promise, make them fear you in ways they don't currently. So I go with it. It's like being the president of the Rotary Club. Once you hear a poem, you've been to a poetry reading, and you've done that for the rest of your life. You never have to do it again. So I'm about to unleash upon you. And speaking of Rotary presidents, I was seated at dinner next to Kathleen Odell, who finished the evening, the meal, by telling me a dead cat story. How could she know I love dead cats? I love dead cat stories. I mean, Well, and you can parse that sentence or stop it anywhere along the way. It's fine with me. Actually, it puts me in mind of my young single parenting days when, following a miserable, epic divorce, the former spouse, whom I now visit in the rehab center, I mean, she had back surgery, terrible surgery. She's making progress, thanks to Pete and whoever's in charge here. But, I mean, we get along fine, but at the time I was very cranky about the whole thing because she left me not only with 4 toddling children, but a cat. Hence my hatred of cats. And it came into my brain box that if I wrote a poem, a hate poem more or less, about the cat, it might light it permanently and relieve me of its care and custody. And so I wrote this poem. My current spouse, a Sicilian woman, who masquerades as a Northern Italian, gave me one of those calendars you get every year. She has bookish interests, like many of you no doubt do, hence the library. But she gave me this calendar that had a new word on it every single day. And you were supposed to use the word over and over again before lunchtime and impress your friends with your ever-widening vocabulary. They would nod and smile and say, "Ah, you got another calendar." One March, I think it was Ash Wednesday actually, the word for the day was grimalkin, which the calendar happily goes on to tell you is a Shakespearean term for a fat, old, lazy, gray she-cat. And as I had the house at the time with a cat of this description, and I needed it, as stipulated, I thought, well, after getting that smudge on your forehead, I and my co-religionists do every Ash Wednesday to remind us of our mortality, like I needed that. And I thought maybe if I went home and put a cigar over the cat's forehead, it would remind it of its pending doom. And so I did. And, I didn't do the cigar. I came home and wrote this poem, which I titled Grimalkin, using the word already once before noon. And I'll read you just a little bit of it. I should say before I read this, for those of you, Kathleen, I think among them, who have cats and love them, do so with my blessings. It's not the feline I dislike, it's this cat in particular, which I hated. You notice how I insert the past tense? Well, which more anon. So, I couldn't find the actual book that it was in, but I think I have it as a sort of part of a running story in this book, so if it gets a little crazy, you'll understand. But you'll get the gist. I once wrote a fairly unflattering poem about that former spouse now in Meadow Lodge, and people took it to mean I didn't like women. It was just that one moment, and only for a little while. I mean, we're over that. Thanks. Grimalkin. One of these days she will lie there and be dead. I'll take her out back in a garbage bag and bury her among my son's canaries, the ill-fated turtle, a pair of angelfish, the tragic and mannerly household pests that had the better sense to take their leaves before their welcomes or my patience had worn thin. For 12 long years I've suffered this damn cat, while my middle son, himself 12 years, this coming May, has grown into the tender, if quick-tempered man-child his breeding blessed and cursed him to become. And only his affection keeps the cat alive, though more than once I've threatened violence. The brick and burlap in the river recompense for mounds of fur balls littering the house, choking the vacuum cleaner, or what's worse, shit in the closets, piss in the planters, mice that winter indoors safely as she sleeps, curled about a table leg, vigilant as any knick-knack in a partial coma. But Mike, of course, is blind to all of it. The gray Angora breed of arrogance, the sluttish roar, the way she disappears for days, sex desperate once or twice a year, urgently ripping her way out the screen door to have her way with anything that moves, while Mike sits up with tuna fish and worried, crying into the darkness, "Here, kitty, kitty, mindless of her whorish treacheries, or of her crimes against upholsteries, the sofas, love seats, wingbacks, easy chairs she's puked and mauled into dilapidation. I have this reoccurring dream of driving her deep into the desert east of town and dumping her out there with a few days' feed and water. In the dream, she's always found by kindly tribespeople who eat her kind on certain holy days as a form of penance. God knows, I don't know what he sees in her. Sometimes he holds her like a child in his arms, rubbing her underside until she sounds like one of those battery-powered vibrators folks claim to use for the ache in their shoulders. And under Mike's protection, she will fix her indolent green-eyed gaze on me as if to say, "What are you going to do about it, slick? The child loves me, and you love the child." Truth told, I really ought to have her fixed in the old way, with an airtight alibi, a bag of ready mix, and no eyewitnesses. But one of these days she will lie there and be dead, and choking back loud hallelujahs, I'll pretend a brief bereavement for my Michael's sake, letting him think, as he has often said, deep down inside you really love her, don't you, Dad? I'll even hold some cheerful obsequies, careful to observe God's never-failing care for even these, the least of his creatures, making some mention of a cat heaven where cat ashes to ashes, cat dust to dust, and the Lord gives, and the Lord has taken away. Thus, claiming my innocence to the end, I'll turn Mike homeward from that wicked little grave, and if he asks, we'll get another one, because all boys need practice in the arts of love, and all their aging fathers in the arts of rage. Now, I never say that poem to myself aloud without thinking of that time, that Ash Wednesday, and it was 1999. It's a good long time ago now. The boy and the cat in the poem were both 12 at the time. The boy, I think, is going 38. The cat lived to be 21. So I did my part. And really the thing that amazed me is after the cat survived that Ash Wednesday, it was, I think, the following Thanksgiving, after the turkey slaughter and the rest of it. No, it was that spring. It was Good Friday. It was near Easter, because I can remember I was calling Dr. Clark, the local veterinary surgeon, the man we have to thank for the cat's longevity, and I was saying things like, Dr. Clark, when Mike comes home for Easter break from the state university where he has been spending his time and my money, I will be bringing him in with Greta, the cat's name, Greta. I want you to do the right thing. And he knew what I was talking about. He'd seen my patients wearing thinner and thinner. The only thing that was wearing thinner and thinner in my biography, but I really, really hated this cat. And I said, we'll be in maybe Good Friday, maybe Easter Sunday. We want you to do the right thing. And I had emailed Mike at the time and said, Mike, when you come home for Easter, your cat you'll find a lot of changes. I let drop the word lumps because I know that has an impact on people. Lump. It was bad grooming, but I let it go. And I said, and her toilet habits have gotten sketchy, and she doesn't seem to eat with regularity. She's probably in misery and pain. You're going to have to be ready to do the right thing. So I thought we had pretty much agreed on this, and after a Saturday funeral, I drove up the big black sedan that we undertakers drive to impress our neighbors with how well everything is going. And I picked up Mike with Greta, the cat, wrapped in a little towel swallowed thus, and we drove down to Dr. Clark's office and met in a windowless room with good lighting and sort of earth tone wall treatments, and out of nowhere that I could discern Enya music, I think it was, playing in the background, and there were just the five of us. count the cat. There was Dr. Clark, his rather comely young assistant, my son Mike, himself a young, comely man, and myself. And the conversation was going precisely where I had intended it to go. Dr. Clark was saying things like, Mike, maybe you're asking yourself now, this is not Dr. Clark, this is me, maybe you're asking yourself, what has this to do with a good funeral? I promise I'll get there. But you laid down the dead cat gauntlet, and I am taking it up. So Dr. Clark said, Mike, you've been such a friend to Greta Lowe these many years, 21, I said. And yeah, Lowe these many years, perhaps a shot of cortisone would give her some comfort in these her final months. Months? Thought I to myself, I've come here for a dead cat today. I thought it was clear. I have the frequent flyer miles spent. I have my credit card balance zeroed out. I had one of my factotums at the funeral, that's another calendar word, arranged for a small box for the occasion, as we do. It was at home in the garage awaiting Pilgrim's sad return. I'd even had a stone cut. Greta, 1978, 1999, gone. I should say, you know, everything was in readiness, and the comely young assistant had taken to looking at my son with a growing panic in her visage, and I was watching this go on, and I noticed then there was one droplet of water working its way out of my son's right eyeball down his very manly cheekbone, I must say, and she was watching it with widening eyes and looking panic-stricken at the doctor and looking back at the boy and the cat in his arms, and the doctor caught on to what was going on, and suddenly he said, we'll take care of this, Mike. We'll take care of this. And then they brought in this shot, which I assumed was the hot shot. I figured he got my meaning pretty well. And they gave him the shot, and the cat sort of rattled around. He said, you can take him home now, Mike, or her home. And I said, I thought to myself, well, of course he wants her to die at home. The good death, death with dignity, all that stuff. And so we gathered up the cat in its swaddling towel and took it home. And a couple hours later, it was sort of, it stopped rattling, and it was sort of moving with a kind of grace. And a limp, no doubt, but a grace to it that made me suspect. And 2 days later, it was eating. And 2 weeks later, it was looking at me like I showed you. Which, of course, it had. And so I'm a member of one of those 12-step organizations that suggests that we let go, let God, fake it till you make all that stuff. No appointments, no disappointments, you know. So I kept my own counsel, said nothing at all. And until Thanksgiving that year, when, after the turkey slaughter and the dishes were done, I gathered Mike and the miserable cat into my office for another audience, and I said to him, Mike, I can take a joke the same as the next guy. But I'm not the kind of guy to make a liar out of stones. You remember Greta, 1978, 1999? It wasn't the money. I can tell you, I get them on the cheap. I can wholesale. It was the sort of existential vexation of the thing. Surely you understand this. Mohandas Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, just to name 3, had only lived in 1 millennium. This cat was on the brink of living in 2. And so I said to Michael, this can't happen. If nature or God or whomever's in charge of this fiasco doesn't do what should be done, do the right thing, which I've been calling for most of the year, I will, on New Year's Eve, drop that stone on that cat and kill it dead. And he believed me. Because this story enacted itself, which is all true. I saw it all with my own 2 eyes. Sometime in early December, he came home from school, and went out in the backyard, and in the little bed where my delphinium used to prosper, he dug a hole in the earth. And the following day, he gathered up that miserable cat and disappeared for most of an hour. And he came home an hour later with the cat still wrapped up in a little swaddling towel, dead. And other things that happened that were strange and should be mentioned. His siblings from different parts of Michigan came home, apparently to be with him, and my wife had laid in a bunch of finger food, potables, and friends of my children's youth started showing up for no apparent reason. And Michael, when he showed up with the cat, said, "Dad, do you still have that box?" We're reliable sorts, and I had the box, and I got it out of the garage, and I put it on the picnic table where Mike bent and put the cat in the box and wrapped it up in a towel, and then he bent to kiss it. And you know, they stood around for most of an hour, maybe two, drinking my store-bought drinkables and eating my finger food and saying things about that cat that still bother me, like what a great cat it was. All this other hootenanny stuff. They just make that stuff up, I think, what they do. But suddenly, without any particular signal or sign, Mike went over to the picnic table and put the lid on the box with the cat in it. And then he seized it by its corners and began the slow walk out to the hole that he had dug the night before, which had become suddenly its final resting place. And I thought, this is when I'm going to go along for the ride. So I followed him out to the garden he had murdered. And on the way, he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "Dad, inasmuch as my heaven would be incomplete without Greta in it, ought we pray?" The thought that I could not occupy a heaven without this cat in it if I want to be with my son fetches me yet to this day. And draws a direct line to that woman in Nettelage in Michigan at the moment. But anyway, I'm just saying, when he got there, he knelt and put the cat in the box in the hole in the ground, and then he stood up and he said, and he looked right at me when he said it, "I can't thank you enough for being here. But some of these things I should do alone." I took it as a sign he wanted to be alone. So I turned and I made my way back to the house, which was now pretty much empty of all the celebrants and con-celebrants and all the finger food, and the bar was empty. And, but I turned and I looked and I could just see his shoulders rising and shaking a little bit as they do. And I thought, this is a sign of superior parenting, that I have taught this boy to figure out that the way we deal with death, the idea of it, is to deal with the dead thing. And so if you get the dead where they need to go, somehow you get to where you need to be, because he seemed to have gotten where he needed to be. He came back from that grave, which he, by the way, filled in himself with a shovel. Came into the house, thanked everybody who was still left, said, "I better get back to school." And we didn't see him again until Christmas. And even now, nearly 20 years since, his 2-year-old daughter, he has taken out to that stone over the hole in the ground that he filled in years ago. And he tells her about the cat that he loved and how sad he was when he buried it. Now here's a part of the story that I think will one-up you. Yeah. That Christmas, no, it was the following year for my birthday, a feast that happens in October. My daughter and my sons conspired to get me for my birthday. The catching the breath tells you. me that you know exactly the truth. Yes, one of those little striped tiger things. They were calling it Amy. I was calling it Bruiser. And they thought it would fix my damaged feelings about cat things in general. And I said, the hell you say? And I said, put it out in the garage. And this is where I began to think of this. I got a bale of hay and put it out in the garage where cats belong. Bruiser, Amy, whatever you want to call it. But I found myself going out there every morning. I get up really early, and I'd go out there in the morning and give a tin of really expensive designer cat food. And I'd have these mindless conversations with the thing, like, Amy, Bruiser, you should have known Greta. Now there was a cat. and my son, Sean, who was at the time a rock and roll star, which is to say he lived exactly the opposite schedule as me, would go out there in the dark at night with another tin of expensive cat food that I was buying. And he would have, I think, meaningful conversations with it too. And everything was really going well. My son, I thought, needed to have something helpless and new. And everything was going pretty good for about 3 weeks. It was, I counted, 3 weeks that Bruiser was there. And then my older son came home from he's a fly fishing guide in the western hinterlands of Michigan. And he came home for a visit with his dog, sort of a wolfish dog. I think they call it a husky. It's got blue eyes, strange looking dog. And the dog leapt out of the truck after the long journey and was running along the side of our garage. And just at that time, Bruiser, or Amy, according to Sean's testimony, probably thinking I was home, ran out along the same side of the garage. It was dark. Imagine the worst. And then double it, because I think it was close to midnight when Sean came banging at our bedroom door saying, Dad, Mary, come quick, Tommy's dog is killing my cat. He suddenly admitted his. Double it again for the little splatter of blood when the dog, a wild thing, shook that neck until it broke and splattered blood along the white clapboard of the garage wall. When I saw those tiny little dots of kitten blood, I thought, this is what William Carlos Williams meant when he wrote about that red wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater, beside the white chickens. What are you talking about? I used to say to myself, but I knew when I saw those drops of blood, I would have liked to see anything else to constantly. So much more could have depended on it. Double it again, because there I am after midnight in my boxer shorts out in my garden, digging a hole in the ground for a cat, and a kid who was asking questions like this. Why wasn't God watching? A fan of Tom Waits is what he was. And there's a song by that title, or at least has that trope in it. And I said, I don't know. I wish I knew, but here's what I do know. On the day I thought, this is why I love being a writer. And this is why I love being a funeral director. And this is why I fear being a parent. For questions just like that, for which there is no answer. There is no Bible verse or bottom line or arithmetic or physics or anything else that can make up for the fact that there was a cat I hated for 21 years and could not kill, and there was one I kind of liked for 21 days and I could not keep it alive. Who makes this shit up? I said to myself. Who makes it up like that? Or as one of my friends said at Bible study this morning, we meet on Tuesday mornings at 6:30 in the funeral home for context. Where is heaven? He said. And then we went to coffee, put that question on hold. But it's a question of that sort. But I still think that a good funeral, and isn't that a handsome cover? And isn't it nice the way Long and Lynch sort of split the bottom masthead? Dr. Long is a theologian. And if you only got that book to read his meditations on funerals and grief and mourning, it would be worth it. And my part is gravy, as they say. Let me move through here. Well, that's another story. I'll tell that another time. You often look at these old pictures of your grandparents and wonder how they made babies. Don't you? We're in a library. I thought we should talk about dictionaries. They're going out of style, I know, but they're lovely. And they deliver up all sorts of mysteries. The one that I really like is how the grave, as we call it, means also to engrave, you know, like 1978, 1999. It also means important, serious, and a pit to bury our dead in. And it's related to the circumstance of pregnancy, expectancy. And anybody who's ever spent any time with pregnant women or dead bodies by graves, you know you're playing in the deeper end of the pool than you're used to. And it is vested in gravitas. It's solemn. It's serious. And it keeps us with our feet on the ground like gravity does. It keeps us centered and sensible and bound to our own path. So I say that the dictionary is full of mysteries and solutions to mysteries.
If you walk around the cemetery, you know, you see the families that were original settlers of the area, and just kind of travel through time with these families. You see who married who, and women who lost 3 or 4 children, women who died in childbirth. Just all of these histories that are kind of documented there and underneath the oak trees, and it's a beautiful place. I do go there sometimes. He thinks it's a little creepy. Not the cemetery itself, but the idea of just walking to a cemetery for a reason other than to bury someone. But I like to see the history, and I feel some sort of almost kinship with these women who have buried these children. You know, you see those tiny little tombstones, and you see these stories, and then we have this story ourselves, you know. It's in some ways kind of comforting or something. I don't know why, but just to feel like we're a part of this history and that others have gone through it. And we're just more family, you know, with our own child and our own grief, and also our own will to survive, because we have to go on without him. You know, he will be gone, and our story will continue, just like those other families, you know.
That young mother, her name is Nevada Verino. She's seated with her husband, who looks particularly desolate. And his namesake, their little boy, Anthony Verino, who in the months since his birth, they have spent most of those months trying to get a name for the terminal diagnosis of a neurological disorder that disallows his hearing, his seeing, his speaking, his knowing what's going on, although the way the neurological impairment makes his eyes dark towards his mother's would almost make you think he sees her, he hears her, he condoles with her. And when he died, the following January, about 2 months after that filming, the family gathered to do essentially what Mike did, which is to say, to deal with his death by dealing with his dead body. And I often think about the first Neanderthal widow who awakened in a tomb next to a lump like this, 40 or 50,000 years ago, depending on what channel you watch at night, and wondering what she'd do faced with the dead thing. Faced with a stillness beyond any stillness she'd seen before, a silence beyond silence listened for. What would she do about that? My guess is she'd look for someone to help her grab an ankle, and haul him out of the cave and into a ditch, which would be his grave, or into a pond, which would be burial at sea, or maybe she'd leave the place to him, in which case the cave would become his tomb, as caves do, those sepulchres. And this is what separates the human thing from every other thing. We humans, we people of the humus, we people of the earth, we people who raise our cities out of the ground and put our dead back into it, we humus-bound people are always looking for some way to get rid of the dead guy, even though we love them. Have you noticed? This is true of all human species, all human cultures across the globe, that they have noticed that they can't seem to live with the dead for very long. Have you noticed that? That's one of the reasons they call me in the middle of the night. What they're saying, that the problem they have is that there's a corpse on the floor. Whether the floor is intensive care, or the kitchen, or the bathroom, or the bedroom, or the cardiac care unit, or emergency room. There's a corpse on. The priest in my town used to always say, "Why do they call you first, Tom?" When I'd call to set the time of the funeral and the date. "Why do they call you first?" I said, "Well, for starters, I answer the phone." Or as my wife used to say when it would ring at 3 o'clock in the morning, "Someone better be dead." The fact of the matter is we can, as a species, live with broken hearts. I dare say a few of you are living with broken hearts as we speak. All right. And we can live with shaken faith. We can live with a refusal to believe that a good, loving God can do this to us or ours. We can live with that. But, and you can try this at home, you cannot live with a corpse on the floor. You will not. Either you'll move it or you'll move. But if you're like the first Neanderthal widow, you kind of had a lot invested in the space. You like the decor, you spend a lot of your best years there, and the dead guy next to you. And that's sort of what's been putting me to work low these many years. It's the way it works. The problem that death presents is not entirely intellectual or existential or spiritual or religious or financial. It's really simple. It's a corporal work of mercy we do when we move the dead. It's shoulder work and shovel work and labor, hard labor, much as the kind that is done when someone is brought into being at the other end of this dramatic comedy. You know? So, and we do put stones around because we don't want the raccoons and we don't want the other living things that will die to come after it. They found this little skull in a place in South Africa a couple summers ago. That's a skull the size of a grapefruit or a navel orange. But they called it human because it was put into a cave with intention, a mountainous region where they found dozens of these little skeletons from what they reckon is hundreds of thousands of years ago. Another kind of missing link. Humans do this. We've been doing it all along. To get where we need to be, we get the dead where they need to go. That's the simple formula. We deal with death by dealing with our dead. So, I want to tell you what I think are the essentials of a good funeral. The things without which we cannot have one. You can have something else. But these are the essentials. If you want to have a good funeral, cover these 4 bases and the rest is optional. Can you hear me? These 4 bases. You need a dead guy. You need someone who agrees to quit breathing forever. And I mean, our country delivers up nearly 7,000 of these a day. So you don't have to volunteer too early. But I can tell you the numbers are really convincing on this. Hovering as they do around 100%. We die. But the corpse is not incidental to a good funeral. The corpse is the reason we have good funerals. And the good funeral is what gets the corpse, gets our riddance from the corpse. So even those funerals where I go to the crematory myself because the family's too busy having a luncheon at the country club or playing canasta in memory of the canasta player or any other thing that absolutely, when I go myself and take the dead where they need to go, that's the funeral. It's just a very badly attended one. Really badly attended one. I'm the only one there sometimes. It could be better if we were more human, if we took more seriously our humanity, because the signature of our humanity is that we deal with our dead. We did for 50,000 years, and we quit about 50 or 60 years ago. Have you noticed that the dead no longer are part of their own obsequies? That's another calendar word. Or as my mother-in-law said when she went to one of her son's in-laws' funerals and walked into the room where there were pictures and there was rumors of a dove release going to take place. There was a bagpiper out in the parking lot. "Where's Ray?" she said. Well, Ray, of course, had been just cremated, the operative word being just, or just buried, it doesn't matter. Or just blown out of a cannon or left in a tree, it doesn't matter. Ray wasn't there. These bodiless obsequies that have come about in our generation for the most part, speaks to our failure to step up to that plate of humanity. What, we ask, are we afraid of? In the Bible study this morning, we were reading that part of Matthew where he crosses the lake, Jesus does, and one of the disciples says, "I'd follow you anywhere." And another one says, "I'll follow, but I first have to go home and bury my father." By which he means, I'd just like to take a little time to get my business in order, my kids raised, my father's last wishes met, and then I'd like to bury my father. And Jesus says something along the lines, I thought it was really fairly cranky. "Let the dead bury the dead. You follow me." And then this gave way to a conversation among a bunch of old farts, such as myself, on where we were when our parents died. Were we holding their hands or their heads? Or were we with them? Or how did we find out? What did they say? What lessons did we take from it? What does it mean in our lives? And yet as a generation, we have wholesale gotten rid of the dead guy as if it was some sort of embarrassment. And we constantly go to these celebrations of life that are notable for the fact that the finger food is good, the talk is uplifting, the music is life-affirming. Someone's on hand to proclaim closure, usually just before the Merlot runs out. And everyone is welcome, but the dead guy, who's been spirited away by someone like me for a fee. You can put it on a card, get your frequent flyer miles. What I'm saying is, we ought, if we need to be anywhere, that's where we need to be. The rest is accessory. The corpse is essential. Dealing with the corpse is the central theme of a good funeral. We need mourners, people to whom it matters. Because if nobody cares, nobody cares. We also need a better story than some of us are willing to opt for. Most of us have lost what Dr. Long calls our eschatological nerve. We don't believe the way we used to, do we? We're glad to talk about heaven in the same way we talk about Leave It to Beaver, and Ozzie and Harriet, and Father Knowing Best, etc., etc. But do we really believe? Do we keep faith in that? Do we have a hope in that? I don't know. According to the theologian Dr. Long, no, we don't. And that's what accounts for the fact that we try to replace the story of our death, our suffering, our death, our eventual salvation, and the possibility of living eternally. That story we don't believe in as well, so what we replace it with is nobody made chocolate chip cookies like Grandma. Or Dad really love the 9th hole at Deer Park Golf Course. I'm no longer burying lapsed Catholics and devout Methodists and born-again Baptists and all variations of Jews. I'm burying bowlers and bikers and golfers and gardeners. We don't talk about what folks believed in or hoped for. We talk mostly about what they did on the weekends. And we have these things themed. I don't know, check it out next time you go to a funeral. Because they have whole ensembles of stuff you can buy to keep the theme in order. And it's really important, I think, that the story be very nimble, very strong, and infrastructure suitable for human mortality, because we are human and we do think about these things. We wonder about heaven. We wonder about an afterlife. We wonder, is there anything there at all? We wonder. So the story we tell each other about the dead and the living who survive them, who will be dead, better be a good one. We can do better than we've been doing. If we don't get our eschatological nerve, as they call it, back, which is a calendar word for our sense of final judgment and final reward and final punishment, last things. If we don't believe that story anymore, then let's come up with another one. Something just as strong, just as able to bear our human frailty, our mortality. And then, the fourth thing that a good funeral does is it gets rid of the dead guy. It transports the dead from out of the place of the living to a place for the dead, of honor, memory, consolation, whatever, you know. So what I'm suggesting to you is, if you're going to burn your dead, go to the fire. If you're going to bury your dead, go to the ground. If you're going, and watch it done. Or at least know it's being done. Warm to the fire. Maybe you'd have a hymn for this. I don't know. But we can do better than sort of washing our hands of it before it's over. Go the distance with your dead. You'll return improved by it. I guarantee you, you'll be occupying holy space. So, I can blather on forever and ever, and may yet. I can tell you this, I sort of promised to be a question and answer period, and if you're not tired of my voice, I am. So this is the question and answer period. If you don't have any questions, I notice a couple of my old books of poetry hanging around, and I can cobble together the 2 or 3 hour poetry reading, just waiting for a crowd of such magnitude to spring it on. So now's the time when you want to think a question or two to stump the undertaker, so we can carry on in the direction of your interest and not just mine. In the meantime, maybe I'll, never mind. I have all these pictures that I often give. Here's an idea. Ask it out loud. What are you wondering?
Boy, bubbles.
Yeah. Why? What's that?
It's joy.
They're celebrating a life.
Exactly.
Yeah, why bubbles?
Because they go up.
They do, don't they? And they don't sometimes get attacked by hawks like doves do.
Right.
Messy.
They ascend.
They ascend, like incense used to when we went to church.
Exactly.
Right, yeah. Well, actually, in this case, it's not because of that. It's because the woman whose body is in the box liked, listen closely, Lawrence Welk music. So isn't that nice?
So
What I'm saying is that's not a big enough story.
what is the letter?
The letter? Maybe she was in love with a football player. Or maybe she was a football player. Who knows? But I think it bespeaks some academic attachment. And you see the guy in the back. Where do you think this is taking place? Concentrate on the curtains. In a funeral home. You can always tell a funeral home because they have curtains in the 1950s and they never change. And you can also tell the guy in the back with the suit, the tie on, and the funny glasses that he should have changed out maybe 30 years ago. He's the guy who's passing on the funeral home to his son, who is the Mitt Romney lookalike in the right-hand corner there, you want to see a little bit, who said to his dad, "Dad, the newest thing is bubbles. Bubbles will do it." That'll stop all this we're going to celebrate life. We're not going to have funerals. But it's a sales pitch on all levels, is what I'm saying. Well, here's another one. Another wooden box, another circle of people. Everything's the same, but different. In what way? Can you tell me?
A different denomination.
Different box.
Well, the box is pretty close. One is ash, one is oak. One is a coffin-shaped box, one is a casket-shaped box. But oh yeah, the shoulder part is different.
They're holding on to each other.
They're holding on to each other too, isn't it? And also, I don't think that box is empty. That bubble box, I think, it could be empty. I sometimes look and I think, let me see. Of course, I'm named for that famous doter who said, touch. He never did. But I'm glad for his doubt. Because I think it speaks to something very human in us. But when you compare those two pictures, it looks a little different. So any questions is what I want to say.
Well, I have a comment on the pictures.
Yeah.
The two pictures. I believe it's in Lamentations where we're told that it's better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting. Because in a house of mourning, you think exactly what you were saying. You think of your mortality. And that could be you in that box. And if you're in that box, well, then where did your spirit go? It's interesting because I'm new in the vocation and I love it. I'm 2 months new. And I've seen exactly what you're saying, and I love working at the funeral home that I work at, but I have seen that it's almost, it's not the funeral home, the families are choosing this, almost a veneer, and
It's entirely a veneer.
where is this?
Yes. It's a virtual experience,
Exactly.
where the authentic experience somehow is lost to us. How do we do it here? Let me see if I can move along quickly. I mean, this is in Ireland. The man who was in the box on the shoulders was the Nobel laureate for poetry a few years ago. Oh, well, here's a guy that didn't get the memo about celebrating life, right? He clearly didn't get that memo how you're supposed to have a drink and, say something funny, tell a joke about Uncle Louie, and everybody go home with their private grief. He looks desolate, Joe Biden does. He didn't run for president because of this. It made a difference in his life. And in ours. You're exactly right. And look at the little, is she a grandchild?
Yes.
Next to him? Is that the daughter of the man in the box? God knows. It's as if she knows what's going on. Are we afraid of this? Because we don't do it so much anymore. We don't do it so much anymore. And we are among the biggest offenders. We're the ones who are constantly telling each other, and the pre-need salesman from the cemetery, oh, I don't want to be a burden to my children. I want to be a burden to my children. They were a burden to me. Their dance classes and orthodonture, and silly questions they asked about cats, all that crap. I mean, now I have to say that bearing those burdens makes me at this end of my life feel like I had a purpose. As if whomever's in charge here really wanted me to be a dad. Even though I made some mistakes and didn't know if I was doing the right thing, I had faith in my parenting because I had faith in my parents parenting me. And I have faith in my kids that they'll figure out what to do with my body when I'm dead. I don't have to say, do this, don't do that, only spend this. I don't have to say a word. I'm leaving everything else to them. Why not leave this burden? Because I think by bearing it, it might do them some good. It might make them feel as good as I feel about having borne the burden of their babyhood, toddlerhood, and young adulthood, and their adulthood. Even mostly they just need cosigners now, but I mean, there was a time when they really needed me to survive.
It seems as though the disposal of the body is much easier than it was, pardon me, 30 years ago.
We go for convenience rather than
Exactly.
the the doing of it. I think we sell ourselves short.
Sure.
I think, let me tell you a story. We cremate more than half of the dead in Milford, my hometown. And we'll end up at 60 or 70% before it sort of goes back to earth burial or burial at sea or whatever we decide to do. But here's the point. Every time we arrange for a cremation, I say to the family, would you like to come to the crematory with me because we're actually going to put the body in a chamber full of fire. And I don't say decent, I say, we're going there, it's a holy space. If we were going to the grave, you go, and you stand and look into the grave like that first Neanderthal and ask questions like, is that all there is? Can this happen to me? Why is it cold? Are we all alone? What comes next? That's why you sense it's a holy place. Because people are rummaging through their brain boxes with these ruminations. And when that's going on, it's holy. And yet, not 1 out of 5 families that I invite to go to the crematory will go. When I say, would you like to go to the crematory with me, they look at me like I'm suggesting the second root canal. They really do. And it's because of Dante, of course, because in our culture we think of fire as wasteful and punitive, right? Because when you're in trouble with God, you go to hell where you are not freeze-dried. Right? So we have these odd ideas about fire, and yet the open fire is as good as the open ground when it comes to caring for our dead with honor. Those tongues of fire over the heads of the apostles on the first Pentecost were meant to be the Holy Spirit because it was real fire, real flame, real warmth and illumination, and yet we cremate half our dead and no one watches. What's wrong with this picture, I ask you? Because I'm always. I can tell you this. Never, in the 45 years I've been doing this, has someone gone to the crematory with me, and these are not pretty places, they're mostly industrial parks, batch factories with a good cash flow, so they put a couple of retorts in the back garage. It's not God's little acre like, whatever cemetery you want to go to. It's their industrial. We get the fire right. We just don't get the metaphor of fire. But when they go there and they help me raise the box into the chamber, I have never had anybody leave one of these places and say anything but, thank you. I needed to be here. Never once has anyone said, I wish you hadn't suggested this to me. Never once. Never once. So what I would like to do is embolden you to do what humans do. To retrieve and renew our purposes as humans, which is to care for our dead. Get the help you need if you need help. Allow your friends who want to help. But do the heavy lift. Do the heavy part. Do the existential part. And if you're planning on being the dead guy, which I suggest some of us should begin to think about, because it's sort of like on the horizon, let me say, then leave well enough alone. They figured out how to do Christmas. They figured out how to do divorces. They figured out how to do making babies. They'll figure out how to bury dad and mom or burn them. They will. You might want to leave a credit card with a little extra balance on it, but I'm just saying the hard part, the heavy lift, they will figure out. And if they do it, it'll make them better humans. And you can say, from whatever space you occupy, that was a sign of superior parenting until someone gets you another cat. Any other questions? One, yeah.
Through your talk, I keep thinking about 9/11. I keep thinking about my military service. Sometimes there's no body. Death is sudden, and there's nothing left. And does the funeral industry offer anything to survivors of that kind of death?
Well, the funeral industry, as you call it, is not very industrious. And we try. We really try. But I think, if we can't have the body, and it was a cruelty that 4,000 people killed on that 9/11, were so commingled with their murder that they disappeared. And for those people who say, well, that's just a shell, I'd rather remember Mom the way she was, consider the joy, the prayers answered when they found a thumb and matched the DNA to someone who worked on the top floor, or the 10th floor, or whatever, when something that was lost is found in part. And this happens at war of all kinds. Our country spends an awful lot of time and energy and money to bring our dead back home. Not because the dead care, but because the dead matter to the living. We should rise to the same occasion. We have to understand that the dead matter. If only momentarily, if only to ourselves, they are what our humanity becomes. And the more we spend with them, the more time and energy we take in doing it, the better we are at dealing with the big concept of death. We wouldn't go to a baptism without the baby there. We wouldn't let the bride and groom phone in their promises from Arugula, or whatever that island is where they don't wear their clothes. Well, that's Aruba. I spent too much time in the greengrocers. Anyway, we wouldn't go to a wedding without a bride there, but we go to funerals without the body there all the time. And we think, isn't this cool? Where's Ray? I say, keep him in it for a while. So, I don't know. Maybe one more question, and then I'll read you the final poem. We'll call it a day.
What inspired you to get into this field?
I had to keep body and soul together. And my father was a funeral director. And I never, ever experienced gratitude the way I watched him be thanked by people. And I experienced gratitude as a teenager when I'd be swinging the door at the funeral home on weeknights to earn enough money to take someone out on the weekend and buy a Chevy, and, the usual stuff teenage boys want. And I'll never forget Mrs. Ivashku, a Romanian woman, whose husband was laid out in the next room, coming to me at closing time and taking me by the shoulders and looking me in the eye and saying, Tommy, she'd known me since I was a child, Tommy, I couldn't have done this without you. And to feel immediately useful and worthy for having done nothing but stand your post, open the door, carry the flowers. Whatever we are given to do is a goodness. So why do we get rid of pallbearers so handily? Why do we get rid of the lift? It is the lift that makes us human. So that's why I got into it. It felt like I was doing something worthy. And it still does. It still does, I must say. It takes my breath. I can't go to a Methodist funeral anymore because every time I hear Charles Wesley's hymns, I just start weeping. They're so good. And they're so true. And I have seen so many kindnesses done by one human to another for no apparent reason except they share the species. That's why I do it. Anyway, I think we've had enough of that. I'll finish with one more point. And I'm thinking of my birthday has just passed. It reminds me, years ago I started writing poems on my birthday because oftentimes I have a bad year. If I could just write one birthday poem, I could still keep my card in the International Society of Unknown Poets. So I got to the point where I just write a sonnet, a 14-line poem. I figured 14 lines in it, do that, It didn't have to be epic, just 14 lines. And so I set forth to write, I was 52 at the time. And so I set forth to write this poem, and when I was done with it, I counted up the lines were 15. Which makes true this trope, and you can memorize this and think about it from there. The older we get, the less we count. Which accounts for the title for this poem, Refusing at 52 to Write Sonnets. See how we poets can make anything work. So I say it in Thanksgiving not only for the library's kindness and hospitality, but for You all sit through this blather with taking messages. Let me see if I can remember. It came to him that he could nearly count how many Octobers he had left to him, in increments of 10, or say 11. Thus, 63, 74, 85. He couldn't see himself at 96, humanity's advances notwithstanding in healthcare, self-help, or New Age regimens. What with his habits and family history? The end, he thought, is nearer than you think. The future thus confined to its contingencies. The present moment opens like a gift. The balding month, the blue week, the warm morning, the hours routine, the minutes passing glance, all seem like godsends now, and what to make of this? At the end, the word that comes to us is thanks.
Thank you for coming this evening and joining us for the series. And I want to remind you that tomorrow night we have Ask the Funeral Director. Be sure to come with lots of questions. Begins here at 7 p.m. Also Thursday night we have the author Roz Chask coming to the Art Museum at 7 p.m. Please be sure if you, we are still selling copies of Mr. Lynch's books out in the auditorium. And you can stop and have him sign the books. And thank you so much for